The classroom was full of chatter as students settled into their seats. The professor stood at the whiteboard, writing a long and complicated equation. When he turned around, he smiled confidently. "All right, class," he said, "this one's a real challenge. I doubt anyone here can solve it. Even graduate students struggle with this problem." The room grew quiet. Most students avoided his gaze, pretending to focus on their notebooks. Then, from the middle row, a calm voice spoke up. "I can solve it, sir," said Marcus, a quiet student in a gray hoodie. The professor raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You can solve this?" he repeated with a mocking laugh. "All right, Marcus. Tell you what, if you can actually solve this, I'll quit my job." The class erupted in laughter. Some students shook their heads, whispering that Marcus had just embarrassed himself. But Marcus didn't flinch. "Okay," he said confidently. "Deal." He stood up, walked to the front, and took the marker from the professor's hand. The room went silent except for the squeak of the marker on the board. The professor leaned against the desk, smirking, arms crossed. Marcus stared at the equation for a few seconds, then began to write. "The trick," he said quietly but clearly, "is to recognize that this isn't just a calculus problem. It's a pattern problem. You simplify the inner function first before applying integration by parts. Most people start from the outside. That's why they get stuck." A few students leaned forward, watching closely. Step by step, Marcus broke down the equation, explaining his reasoning as he went. His movements were confident, precise, and sure. The professor's smirk began to fade. He moved closer to the board, following Marcus's logic carefully. When Marcus finally drew a box around the final answer, the classroom was dead silent. He turned to face the professor. "That's the solution," he said simply. The professor stared at the board, his eyes scanning the work. He picked up a piece of chalk and redid part of the math under his breath. Then he stopped. His face shifted from disbelief to realization. "That's correct," he said quietly. The silence broke as a few students clapped. Others looked at Marcus in shock. The professor turned toward him slowly. Marcus smiled slightly. "So," he asked, "does that mean you're quitting?" The class burst into laughter. The professor couldn't help but chuckle too, shaking his head. "Well, Marcus," he said, "I guess I walked right into that one. You've proven me wrong." Marcus shrugged modestly. "You don't have to quit, sir. Maybe just stop doubting people so quickly." The professor smiled and nodded. "Fair enough," he said. "You've got real talent." The bell rang, and students began to pack up. Several of them congratulated Marcus as he returned to his seat. The professor stood by the board, still looking at the solved equation, deep in thought. He whispered to himself, "Never judge someone by what you think they can't do." As Marcus walked out of the classroom, the professor watched him with a proud smile. The student who had been underestimated had just changed the whole room's perspective, with nothing more than confidence, knowledge, and quiet determination.